So welcome to this Net Zero Festival Q&A. I'm here with Dr. Elaine Lancaster, who's Chief Technology and Innovation Officer at Ideal Boilers. Hi, Dr. Lancaster, how are you doing today?
Hi, good. Very well, thank you.
Thanks very much for joining us. So we're here to talk today about what decarbonisation of heat means for installers. So for the people that are working on gas boilers now, what sort of things can you do now to help in the race for decarbonisation, and what sort of things that in the very near future we might be transitioning into. So first off, we're going to talk about policy. So what is the state of the net zero policy at the minute?
The status of the policy is from June last year, when the then Prime Minister Theresa May changed our legal obligation so that now by 2050 we are targeted to be at net zero. That was obviously a change from the 80% target that had been in place before then. So that's the main legal obligation that we've got, but 2050 is quite a long way off. Unfortunately, we've got to be doing things now. If you look at the Committee for Climate Change's recent progress report, we've got to just accelerate what we're doing now. If you look at the other way that we're legally targeted to get there is the carbon budget. So we're on track to meet the next 2 carbon budgets, but really once we get into 2030, we're not going to stay on track. So that's the sort of long-term policy. And then if we look at the shorter-term policy statement, that's really sort of new build building regs. And we know from last year, from February, big announcements that by 2025 there will be no fossil fuel gas allowed in new build homes. So we're still expecting by 2025 for it to be a low carbon green heating solutions in our new build. As we have found with the consultation to the Building Regs 2020 and unfortunately the impact of COVID-19, what we're probably going to see is a delay to 2021 of the current revision to building regs, and whether that has any impact on that will remain to be seen.
Yeah, so can we talk about the landscape for new build properties? You mentioned they're phasing out gas and oil for these properties. So what sort of things do installers have to be aware of for new build?
So really for new build, it will be dictated by the changes to the building regulations in terms of the target carbon reduction emissions and also the primary energy that those buildings are going to have to achieve. So today, 2012 building regs, we're looking at a gas boiler with a good level of fabric insulation. When we come to building regs 2020, we're likely to still see boilers predominate there because they're a reliable, well-trusted product. And there are other things that the builder can do to then enhance the property to meet the 2020 regulation. So we'll see some further improvements to fabric, and we'll probably see some heat recovery come in, be it flue gas heat recovery or wastewater heat recovery, and then we might see some PV depending on which level the government decide to go for. So I think everybody feels that 2020 is going to be a step in the right direction, but we're not going to see from an installer's point of view anything massively different from what we're seeing today. We might start to see a few more heat pumps be installed, but they're going to be more, I think, builder preference rather than, the regulations will make that mandatory. So I think then what we're going to see by the time we get to 2025 is when the big impact is really going to hit, especially for the installer community. So that's when we're going to see heat pumps come into play, either just to do hot water with heat pump water heating cylinders, or for the whole property through air source heat pumps that will require a very different mindset, a different way of heating the home, lower flow temperatures. The consumer now will start to see the impact. And I think, unfortunately, there's a lot of resistance in certain camps to heat pumps because, they are different. They do require good knowledge of how to size them correctly and then how to install them. So, yeah, we've still got a number of years left, but I think if it's going to move quickly, then we need to start the training and we need to start helping installers now.
And then obviously, so new build is great because you can build it from the ground up, and you can put in your low temperature radiators or underfloor heating, and you can put in all the fabric to get to there. But probably the biggest challenge is going to be for retrofit properties, isn't it? So what at the minute should installers be thinking about for retrofit properties when they're going into existing homes?
So I think with retrofit, there are absolutely things that we can be doing now, and we have been doing. You know, we've made a 14% improvement in emissions to buildings between 2008 and 2018. A lot of that came on just phasing out non-condensing boilers, so getting rid of those FG low performing boilers and fitting condensing boilers. You know, getting rid of oil to higher efficiency oil, or if you can switch to different types of heating, great, you know, in off-gas properties. The fabric, again, we've had schemes running for, you know, many, many years. So if you can get grants, if you can look for funding, you know, the homeowners should be looking to install loft wall and floor insulation and upgrade windows whenever possible. So, you know, the installer can fit a condensing boiler, you know, can encourage the homeowner to think about moving to a higher efficiency boiler when they're getting it serviced or when they're, you know, dealing with breakdowns. Once they've got a condensing boiler, then there's other methods to improve the efficiency of the system, making sure that you've got, you know, good controls fitted. You know, it's now mandatory for combis after Boiler Plus to have load compensation or weather compensation or flue gas heat recovery fitted. So, you know, there are things that we can do and we should be doing. Making sure that systems are properly balanced, making sure you've got TRVs on all the radiators, making sure that you've got good water treatment and inhibitors in the systems, cleaned and serviced regularly. Again, these are all things that can improve in the here and now. Use of system filters as well to keep the systems running as efficiently as possible. So, you know, that is the tried and tested products. We just need to make sure that, you know, that's happening at all times. But even with an existing system, you can start to make even more improvements to future-proof for example, heat pumps in the future. So, for example, running your heating system at lower flow temperatures, even with a condensing boiler, will see a really good improvement in performance because you'll be condensing the boiler more of the time. And when you go to a heat pump, you absolutely need those lower flow temperatures. So, you know, again, installers, you know, can help encourage consumers to think, well, if I'm replacing a radiator through home improvements, think about putting in bigger radiators. Think about zoning off through the TRVs, only heating part of the house at a particular point in time. So, you know, there are really good practice measures. Understanding about heat loss is something that installers can start to learn now, because one of the things that's going to be really key for heat pumps is being able to understand what the thermal performance of homes is, and also how to make the heat loss improved. Because if we can improve the heat loss and if we can reduce the heat emitters, the heat emitter flow temperatures, then we can properly size the right size of heat pump that's smaller in capacity to meet the house demand, which one is going to make sure that the heat pump's got more chance of, you know, working correctly and giving consumers the right comfort, but also it's going to be cheaper in the long run because, you know, they're going to be able to install the smaller size heat pumps. And there is a big difference, you know, when you look at the different capacities there. I think, you know, that there is not going to be one size fits all. It's not just going to be about heat pumps, because heat pumps are disruptive, you know, and they don't suit, you know, or they're quite cost prohibitive in a lot of cases. You've got to upgrade the electrical infrastructure as well. So, you know, we are going to see, I think, more heat networks be used on sort of large scale sites, and in urban dense areas. They're certainly going to become more widespread. And then I think, you know, the other topic that is really gained momentum and is sort of very favourable and, you know, absolutely helps to achieve net zero, where heat pumps and electrification can't do it by itself. And that's going to be green gas, biomethane, and ultimately hydrogen in due course. So, you know, I think what we're going to see now is diversity of technology solutions. It's not going to be one size fits all, you know, and that's where, you know, we've got to work and help the installer. They're pivotal to this because they're going to have to go from understanding one technology, you know, a gas boiler predominantly with oil, which is sort of similar in its setup, to now having to understand more about the home itself, more than they have to today, and they need to, and then about sort of heat pumps, heat networks, and hydrogen. You know, they're going to have to understand more diverse technology and specification than they have to currently.
And there's, of course, there's the homeowner education, because we hear a lot about homeowners being inexpert buyers because the heating system isn't really an aspirational product, whereas like a car or a bathroom is. But you need it. It's something you need every day to exist. You need heating and hot water. But when you talk about like low service temperature radiators or underfloor heating, and then you think about people like drying clothes on radiators and they like piping hot radiators and things like that, that won't be the case when like heat pumps come in. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, heat pumps work best with underfloor heating, but you know, we don't have a lot of underfloor heating in this country. It's not what we're
Difficult to
familiar
retrofit as
with.
well.
Oh, and yeah, almost, yeah, not something you'd want to undertake. So, but even in new build, it's still staggering that because of the cost and because of the complexity, you know, we still see radiators as the preferred solution. So yes, you know, we have a radiator-based economy today, and you know, once you reduce the temperatures of those radiators, it's a different level of comfort. You can't just put the heating appliance on and 20 minutes later, you know, you've got the room up to temperature. You've got to think about running that temperature at a much more constant, lower, continuous basis, which doesn't come naturally to a lot of people. There's a lot of lack of awareness that, you know, the temperature that the flow temperature that the water in the radiators runs at, which is what you set at the front of your appliance, is totally different to, you know, the thermostat on your wall where you set a room temperature, you know, and how those two can work together to be more efficient is just not understood at all. When we've done focus groups with customers, you know, I mean, you know, there's really this sort of lack of awareness, and almost, you know, if I put my room thermostat up to 30, it's going to get up to temperature quicker, and things like that, you know. So it is probably one of the biggest barriers, is the fact that consumers don't fully understand the system. Having said that, you know, it's not so much that education is really, you know, what's needed, and you can't really, it's not the fault of the consumer in some ways, because it's very easy to sort of say, oh, we need to educate more, but actually there are other technologies that, if they're more intuitive, you know, I mean, I've always looked at Sky. It's a strange analogy, I know, but nobody used to like sitting on the floor programming in when a VHS video player, for those that could, was to start and finish. You know, you've now got this technology with digital and with, you know, the way that sort of these media centres work, you know, Sky Plus being one, that, you know, you just have to press a button and it's automatically done for you. So I don't know, maybe there's innovation there. We talk about smart systems, we talk about heat as a service, but, you know, I'm sure digital is going to have a big part to play, because if we can make it more intuitive for the consumer, and therefore, you know, it's easier for the installer to be able to, you know, sell the benefits of these products. We don't make it very easy today, you know, to overcome those consumer barriers. So, you know, one for everybody to think about from an innovation point of view.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned having roundtable discussions with consumers and about their habits, because that's not so, because we're Installer Magazine, we think installer. But yeah, what can installers do, and what are Ideal doing as a brand to kind of help with that education process, or help with that kind of different way of thinking, behavioural change?
Well, we're investing in the research and development for a start. So, you know, that consumer research was done when we were looking to design our room thermostats that we sell now. And also when we were looking at the next iteration of our appliance development, you know, the human machine interface, you know, that the consumer interfaces with, you know. So by talking to consumers and talking to installers, you know, what we know from installers is that the easier we can make that for them to be able to communicate that to their customer, because at the end of the day, this is probably a unique sector in the fact that the consumer deals directly with the installer. So, you know, right at the heart of our product development, we know that if we can make our products easier and simpler, then that's already helping the installer right from the very beginning. Then obviously by, you know, working with the installer on the training and on the product support, again, you know, we're helping to support them. But ultimately, we've got to help the installer find it easy to work on our products, both the specification of them and then the commissioning and handover to the consumer.
What about, I think you touched on it, we spoke about Boiler Plus, but the kind of switch to smart controls that you can control with your voice. So everything's controlled on your Alexa or your Google Home. That, like you said with the Sky Plus, is making things a lot easier, because you might not necessarily have to twiddle with dials that you might not necessarily understand, or program things. You can just say, do this, and then the computer does it. Do you see that as a running kind of alongside this process?
Oh, absolutely. I think, voice is just the front end interface to sort of what sits behind the technology. Once you develop, once you've developed the technology where the system works together, and you put in the various user cases and the ways that you want your product to respond to very simple commands, then whether it works with your thermostat controls, or, as you say, with other proprietary home systems through different APIs talking to other products, then yes, that whole digital area just becomes so important for consumers. And that's the job we've got to do from a manufacturing point of view. We've got to think 5 or 10 years in advance to think how those systems are going to work together, not just our systems, because again, I think this is where, as an industry, we can help work together. If we can make protocols and the communication language and develop, those standards and norms, then if everybody uses the same standards and norms, then eventually, your consumer is protected, because whichever product they buy, it can slot together. And I think you have got to be a little bit altruistic and industry thinking, as well as, get your own sort of manufacturing advantage, because we're all in this same challenge together in one respect. We've all got to get consumers to change behaviours, and and help the installer understand and have easy ways and tools in the future to do that.
And the heating industry does work with manufacturers. You guys work with each other to achieve these things. You work with installers, you work with consumers. So there is a definite coming together, and then liaising with government. There's many different strands to it. It's not like you've gone off on your own, but that is a really important point to stress.
Oh, absolutely. And by stressing that, I'm not saying we're not doing that. I'm involved with our industry group, and I think it's fantastic, all the different work. I think there's more than ever with this low carbon heating transition, engagement at all levels, industry to industry body, government are engaging every day with all the different associations and wanting to learn more, because they recognise that industry can really help them. They've got targets to achieve, but I think what the industry have shown time and time again, particularly through the example of like Boiler Plus, is that the industry can help take those targets, look at what works well, learn from the past, look at the type of mechanisms that really work, and help work with the government to turn targets into policy mechanisms that work, both from a regulatory point of view and from an incentive grant point of view. We've just had the recent consultation close on the future support for low carbon heating, the Clean Heat Grant and the Green Gas Scheme. So again, we work together collectively to support making sure that we give the right feedback to government, because we do want to see these low carbon heating products adopted, but in a very responsible way, a way that means that installers are supported. They don't feel that they're being tied up with bureaucracy, or expected to pay huge amounts of money and things, just to be in the game, so
or left out
responsibly.
Left out to the bigger organisations.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got to do it, protect the installer, bring the installer, supporting him all the time, but also making sure that the consumer isn't adversely affected, either through, inadvertent poor installations, because, the system's gone too fast or it's not worked, or, they can also retain their affordable fuel bills as well, because that's the other big concern, that we make sure that that fuel poverty is also addressed, and that's one of the big challenges with off gas, as we know. Electricity versus oil is still proving to be a challenge in some of the homes that are out there. So there's a lot to do. It's an exciting time in lots of respects. There's opportunities for everyone within this industry to help meet the challenge.
So for installers who have got kind of an eye on the next kind of step, so what sort of technologies do you think within the next few years that installers could look at and you see a clear pathway that in 5 years, 10 years, there'll be a big market there for them?
I think if we look at new build, then the government is clear here. Electrification of heat and heat pumps is absolutely where new build is heading. So within the next 5 years, installers should be thinking about understanding about heat pumps, the way that they are sized, the way that they perform and behave, because now they're very different to a boiler. You've got the seasonal temperature effects to think about. When you size a heat pump, you've got to think about its capacity at from an annual point of view. So yeah, understanding all about heat pumps and how they work and how to specify them, and then obviously how to install them. If installers are going to work on split type products, then they need to think about getting accreditation for F-gas. If they want to work on split systems, if they're just going to be working on monoblock systems, then yes, it's good to understand about refrigeration, because they might want to retrain in that area as well. But if not, just to understand, how to specify a monoblock system will be really important. The other thing that's going to be a consequence of heat pumps is storage. So today we've got, nearly 80% of the market is combi boilers. As we move to heat pumps, we're going to see a shift back to having to store hot water. So again, installers, if they haven't fitted cylinders for a while, they're going to need to understand hot water cylinders again, and G3 requirements and RAS obligations as well. So all the various aspects of installing hot water solutions. And that in itself then means that the systems, really need to understand about, S+ plan systems, and, and controlling those sorts of systems then become, something that will really become the norm in the future. So yeah, understanding all about heat pumps and that side of things. Hydrogen's a long way off, but again, from a combustion point of view, will work very similar to a gas boiler. So I think from the installer population today, I think hydrogen is going to be a combustion technology. So we should be well placed in this country to be able to embrace hydrogen appliances as and when the supply chain and the logistics comes in place. I think heat networks is probably for now something that the bigger we're seeing the bigger M&E type companies getting involved with. They tend to be bigger schemes involving real consultants and architects. So again, becoming familiar with heat interface units and how they work will apply to sort of some sectors of the installers. And then just the general good system balancing, water treatment, continuing all the good things that we do today.
And how's the best way to do that? So we talk about training sessions. So how is IDEO as a manufacturer helping installers on that journey?
Yes, so as like every manufacturer, we have our own dedicated training centres where we look to get installers through the door to be able to train them directly on the products. We're also engaged with other companies, other M&E companies that offer their own training to partner as well, where perhaps we're not, we're still sort of getting up and running. So again, at the beginning of our sort of developments, we're working with other M&E companies and their training. And also we're seeing a lot of low carbon regional centres and a lot of renewable specialists as well. So again, partnering with them and helping to support those areas as well. And then in the other ways, we work with industry, so producing best practice guides that we can then obviously put on our website and everything. We've just been working heavily on heat pump benchmark checklists to try and look at the various tools that we have today that work for the gas sector. How can we help support the heat pump sector to move in that same direction? We do CPD courses, so for example with our heat interface units and some of our specification of systems on the more commercial side, we run CPD seminars and energy efficiency schemes and everything there across various of our other brands as well.
That sounds really good. And so the best way to them is to head to the IDEO website or talk to their local rep or get in contact with the training centre?
Yeah, absolutely. And if it's not IDEO, go to the wider Group Atlantic website for some of our other brands, Hamworthy, IDEO Commercial, Keston by IDEO Boilers. There's a few places to look as well.
No, perfect. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Lancaster.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
And thanks for joining us, everyone. Thank you for your time.